One of the most beloved musicians of all time, shot in broad daylight in front of several witnesses for seemingly no reason whatsoever.
We chase the trail where the truth might fall, one step closer to the dark. We're seeking answers, digging through the dust. Every secret's a ghost we can trust. Seeking answers where the silence rusts. The truth's a knife with a blood-stained crust.
Mark David Chapman was born on May the 10th, 1955 in Fort Worth, Texas, to father, United States Force Staff Sergeant David Chapman, and mother, Nurse Diana, with a younger sister named Susan, 7 years his junior. As a child, the family feared his father, who was allegedly physically abusive towards all of them, which caused a lot of anger inside Mark.
We had some sporadic violence in the home.
Your father doing things to your mother?
Would strike my mother, and sometimes in the middle of the night I would hear this, and I would run in there and try to break it up. I felt that I almost had to be a guardian for my mother.
He would later admit to having fantasies about gaining godlike powers over a group of imaginary little people living inside the walls of his bedroom.
There was a whole city of them. They kind of lived in the walls. They were almost microscopic.
Dozens and dozens of people. A whole city full of people.
Hundreds of thousands.
So here were these hundreds of thousands of people, and what were you to them?
I was their king.
The family relocated to Decatur, Georgia when Chapman was young and would go on to attend Columbia High School. However, he was the target of ridicule due to his lack of athleticism. At the age of just 14, he was already taking drugs and skipping classes, at one point running away from home and living on the streets of Miami for 2 weeks. However, in 1971, he became a born-again Christian.
I converted to the Lord at 16, before the shooting. I know a lot of people have a hard time understanding that. How could someone who's quote-unquote born again shoot someone? And my answer to that is, after thinking about it deeply, God, if you were God, you wouldn't want a bunch of robots running around. He gives us free will. We're free agents. We can do what we want. He specifically told me, and I don't want to sound like one of those preachers on TV, but he told my heart, let's put it that way. He told my heart, and he let me know, don't kill. I don't want you to kill. He doesn't like murder. The first baby born was a murderer. But I chose to kill someone. I went against what he wanted me to do.
And once graduating high school, he started working for the YMCA as a camp counselor, meeting his first girlfriend, Jessica Blankenship. He was popular with the kids at the camp and soon promoted to assistant director after winning an award for outstanding counselor. But his mental state still wasn't the best.
I could never figure it out. I mean, I had a major depression. I was an area coordinator. I was in charge of a staff of 15 people. When I got to school, I felt like a nobody. I ended up feeling like a big nobody. And that caused the depression.
A friend recommended Mark check out the J.D. Salinger book, The Catcher in the Rye, and it left a huge influence on him as he became obsessed with the main character, Holden Caulfield. The book tells the story of Holden, who is inside a mental health facility, fantasizing about being freed and wandering the streets of New York City. He often criticizes the adult world for being phony, and imagines himself standing in a rye field, hence the title, where he catches children before they can fall off a cliff in order to protect them.
Catching the Rye is about a young fella named Holden Caulfield who leaves school on a 3-day journey through various parts of Manhattan, in a sense, to find himself. And he doesn't find anything but a bunch of phoniness, and he's telling the book in retrospect from a mental hospital.
You identified with Holden Caulfield?
I did at that time in my life when I had no identity.
The guy who stalked Rebecca Schaefer, the actress, and killed her also said he was reading Catcher in the Rye, and there have been other copycatters. What are your thoughts about them?
I regret that the most because John Lennon wasn't the only person to die because of this. There were suicides after. which I deeply regret.
And there's celebrity stalking.
And there's celebrity stalking. I'd love to talk about that, Larry.
He relocated again to Chicago, playing guitar in church and at Christian night spots, before moving again to Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. He worked for World Vision helping Vietnamese refugees and was named area coordinator and a key aide to the program director David Moore. Moore would later admit that Chapman clearly cared deeply for the children and always worked extremely hard. He left a huge impact, accompanying him to business meetings with government officials and even having the opportunity to meet the United States President Gerald Ford.
Now, I want people to know that he is not an animal, that he is not a screwball or a vicious stalker. Okay, maybe he did it. Probably he did it. He did it. But that's not him.
Chapman then joined his girlfriend at Covent College in Lookout Mountain, Georgia, but things started to go wrong in his life. He cheated on Blankenship and managed to become racked with guilt, causing him to also start to fall behind on his schoolwork. At this point, Chapman began to feel like a complete failure and started to have suicidal thoughts. He dropped out of college after a single semester and his girlfriend ended the relationship not long after as well. He did attempt to return to work at the YMCA, but after an argument with a supervisor, he was let go. In 1977, he spent the remainder of his savings to move to Hawaii, but once there he attempted suicide by carbon monoxide asphyxiation using the exhaust pipe of his car, but the hose ended up melting and he survived.
I drove to the north shore of the island. I found a supposedly deserted spot. I bought at Sears a little cheap plastic vacuum cleaner hose. I hooked it up into the exhaust and I sat in the car and I turned it on and I just said, here I come, and I felt very much at peace. I really did. I felt at peace when I made that decision.
But you were discovered and you were saved.
Yes.
Chapman was then admitted to Castle Memorial Hospital for clinical depression. Once he was let out, he gained employment at the hospital as a maintenance worker, but during this time his parents finally divorced and Chapman's mother flew over and joined him in Hawaii. It was in 1978 when the man began a 6-week trip around the planet, inspired by the feature film Around the World in 80 Days, using YMCA connections that he had gained for free or discounted accommodation. It was during this global journey that he met and formed a relationship with Japanese-American travel agent Gloria Abe, who he married on June 2nd, 1979.
He's my gemstone.
He would, once in a while, hit me or grab me hard, or slap me. I'd have to say, though, in all fairness, he always gave me warning.
When I would get very frustrated, I would hit her.
You did what your father did.
Yes, I did.
Were you a violent man then?
At that point? Not outwardly. My little trick was always holding everything in, as my father did, and then it would just come out explosively. Mark David Chapman at that point was a walking shell who didn't ever learn how to let out his feelings of anger, of rage, of disappointment. Mark David Chapman was a failure in his own mind. He wanted to become somebody important, Larry. He didn't know how to handle being a nobody. He tried to be a somebody through his years, but as he progressively got worse, and I believe I was schizophrenic at the time, no one can tell me I wasn't, although I was responsible. Mark David Chapman struck out at something he perceived to be phony, something he was angry at, to become something he wasn't, to become somebody.
He gained a job at the hospital as a printer, but always worked alone. But he was often fired and rehired continuously, eventually being let go permanently after an argument with a nurse. Chapman began to heavily drink from pure depression, but managed to take on a job as a night security guard at a high-end apartment complex. However, his mental state continued to deteriorate, while his obsession grew with The Catcher in the Rye, as well as with various different celebrities.
Why do you think people stalk celebrities?
People stalk celebrities, and this is just my opinion. I haven't studied psychology, because they have nothing inside of themselves. Their esteem is rock bottom, and they feel that by writing fan letters or actually coming in close contact with a celebrity, they feel important. I know that I did some of those things before the thought of John Lennon or killing John Lennon came into my mind. I went to an art gallery, and Robert Goulet was there, and Leslie Nielsen was there, and I just wanted to be around them, and I had my picture taken with Robert Goulet. I don't think this has ever come out. And I felt important while I was with them. And then after, you disintegrate again. You become nothing.
Mark had quit his job. At this point, he had been working as a security guard, the graveyard shift. Again, not a good position, not a good job. Overtime, if you're depressed, you get depressed. So he signed out his last night on that job. He signed out as John Lennon. So that kind of tells you the state of his mind. He was already not well.
He would often write to friends about how he was struggling mentally and would sign off as the Catcher in the Rye, but supposedly began to plot the murder of a celebrity for 3 months. He allegedly had a list of people he wanted to kill, including talk show host Johnny Carson, musician Paul McCartney, actress Elizabeth Taylor, actor George C. Scott, former First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, President Ronald Reagan, musician David Bowie, Hawaii Governor George Ariyoshi, and musician Todd Rundgren. It's been rumoured that at one point Chapman did travel to Woodstock, New York to search for Todd Rundgren to assassinate him, but this has never been definitively confirmed. But eventually Chapman chose a target: music legend and Beatles icon John Lennon.
All I know is that there was great despair and emptiness of feeling king-size nobody. And I see this real somebody who I perceived at the time to be a phony. My nobody was wanting to strike down that somebody. John Lennon fell into a very deep hole, a hole that was so deep inside of me that I thought by killing him I would acquire his fame.
Chapman would later admit that the only criteria he had for the victim was somebody famous, and that Lennon was only chosen out of complete convenience and jealousy, though he did have a history with the man.
I remember I had little army men, and I pasted guitars on 3 of them and a drum set on one of them that hopefully looked like Ringo in the back, and would play that record over and over, just hundreds of times, through the months and years.
Mark David Chapman was a long-time fan of the Beatles, but he started to have issues when he converted to Christianity. In a 1966 interview, Lennon had claimed that the band was more popular than Jesus, and Chapman took issue with this.
When John made that statement, many years before, he did say that because he was an on-fire believer, he was a Jesus freak, he was very mad, and I'm not sure if he burned their albums or not, but he was very mad at that statement. So I don't know if that came into play in December 1980, but he just wanted to become a somebody because he felt like a nobody, and so he just made that really bad decision.
Certain members of his prayer group actually made a joke in reference to Lennon's song Imagine, saying, "Imagine, imagine if John Lennon was dead." According to Chapman's wife Gloria, he was angry that Lennon would preach love and peace but yet have millions. Chapman's own words would say, "He told us to imagine no possessions, and there he was with millions of dollars and yachts and farms and country estates, laughing at people like me who had believed the lies and bought the records and built a big part of their lives around his music."
I would go to the library. That was my one peaceful oasis when I came across the Anthony Fawcett book, John Lennon One Day at a Time. I pulled that book out of the shelf, and I looked at it, and I began looking through the pictures, and I began judging John Lennon by photograph. I learned from the book that he was from the Dakota, which is this very exclusive co-op in Manhattan, and that angered me. I got very, very angry.
Well, why?
I used to love the Beatles and go along with anything they said. Their idealism meant a lot to me. And I saw that at that time as a sellout. I was just letting loose this tirade of, just an explosive anger at John Lennon.
Rich man, rich apartment.
Yes, that's it.
He thought he was the catch in the rye. He really did. But another book also caught his attention. It was a book about John Lennon, and he saw photos of him in his Manhattan apartment with Dakota, and he began to have jealousy. It's like, I'm working hard and, just have this little apartment here in Honolulu, and he just became enraged at what he was seeing in the book, the pictures of all the luxury that John was enjoying. And so he thought, I'm a nobody. That was how he was feeling. He thought he was a nobody, and he wanted to be a somebody. And so he said, well, to himself, and this I found out later, I didn't know about all this at the time, but in order to become a somebody, he thought, I need to kill a somebody.
He called Lennon a phoney and believed that any particular song was communist. Referring to Lennon's song God, Chapman stated, I would listen to this music and I would get angry at him for saying that he didn't believe in God, that he just believed in him and Yoko and that he didn't believe in the Beatles. This was another thing that angered me, even though this record had been done at least 10 years previously. I just wanted to scream out loud, who does he think he is saying these things about God and heaven and the Beatles? Saying he doesn't believe in Jesus and things like that. At that point my mind was going through a total blackness of anger and rage. So I brought the Lennon book home into this, the Catcher in the Rye milieu, where my mindset is Holden Caulfield and anti-phoniness. It was in October 1980 when Mark David Chapman headed to New York planning to assassinate John Lennon, but he didn't show up to his home.
If Lennon would had unfortunately died a few days prior, say in an automobile accident, would you have stalked someone else? I can't answer that question. I don't know. I was so bonded with John Lennon at that point. What I told them is I'd probably be crushed, and at that point I don't know what I would have done.
There were other people that he considered apparently, but they had bodyguards or they lived in gated communities or whatever. But John and Yoko, their lives were just out there. They got out of their limousine and just walked right into the apartment, but on the public sidewalk. So that's why he picked John Lennon to kill.
Instead, Chapman left to gain more ammunition from an unaware friend named Dana Reeves in Atlanta, Georgia. The next month, he returned to the Big Apple with the plans in mind, but after watching the movie Ordinary People, a film about a young troubled man undergoing therapy, he was convinced to abandon everything and return home to Hawaii. Once home, he actually informed Gloria that he was obsessed with killing John Lennon, even showing her the gun and bullets. But she didn't report this to the police or any mental health professionals at the time.
I was at work. I continued to work at the hospital that we had both worked at one point. And he said, I got rid of the gun. I threw it into the ocean. And don't worry, it's, no one's going to find it. It's gone. The ocean's just going to eat it up. And he said, I need to go away again. I need to think about my life. I need to grow up. I need to be a man. And so he said, please just sacrifice a short time without me, and then when I come back, everything will be all right. Everything will be okay. And so he was telling me lie after lie, and I believed him.
Yes.
I loved him, and I felt it was okay. I didn't want him. I cried a lot during that time, but I said, okay, you can go ahead and go.
Chapman realised that he had a problem when the commandment "Thou shalt not kill" flashed on the television, as well as his wife hanging the same phrase up in their apartment. And he knew that he needed a clinical psychologist, though he didn't go to the appointment. On December the 6th, 1980, Mark David Chapman once again flew to New York City, but this time he was actually considering suicide by jumping off the top of the Statue of Liberty. The next day, he was at the 72nd Street subway station when he aggressively confronted musician James Taylor.
I was actually coming out of the subway at 72nd Street.
Right.
And he had been either on the platform or on the train with me, I can't remember. And as we were
He recognized you.
And as we were walking out, he was you could tell he was agitated. He sort of had he was sweating. He was
disheveled?
He'd clearly been up for a while. His eyes were dilated. He was really a sort of, it definitely creeped me out. You know, I got the vibe from him that this is someone you don't want to spend that much time with. And he was talking, you know, basically sort of talking freak spew, we used to call it, just babbling, rambling on about how he's going to do this and who he knew this person and he couldn't wait to see this person and I'm hoping to do this with that, you know. And I sort of walked up the stairs to Central Park West and 72nd Street, and I said, okay, man, I got to go now. Bye-bye. Scraped him off.
Did he say anything about John Lennon?
In his sort of rambling babble that he gave me, he may have mentioned John, that he was hoping to get something to John or something like that.
According to Taylor, the guy had sort of pinned me to the wall and was glistening with maniacal sweat and talking some freak speak about what he was going to do and his stuff with how John was interested, and he was going to get in touch with John Lennon. He then got a taxi and reportedly offered the driver some cocaine before calling his wife on the phone that night about getting help with his problems, but explained that he first needed to work on his relationship with God.
If it weren't Lennon, could it have been Goulet? Could it have been Goulet? Could it have been Sinatra? Could it have been Paul McCartney?
Probably not one of the other Beatles. This thing started, Larry, when I got angry at Lennon. I found a book in the library that showed him on the roof of the Dakota, and you're familiar with the Dakota. It's a very nice, sumptuous building. And remember, I'm in a different state of mind, and I'm falling in on myself. I'm angry at seeing him on the Dakota, and I say to myself, that phony, that bastard. I got that mad. I took the book home to my wife, and I said, look, he's a phony. It started with anger. It didn't start with a person walking down the street saying, gee, I wish I was famous. This thing, you know, in fairness, wasn't all about becoming a pseudo-celebrity. It was born of anger and rage, and that's what happened.
December the 8th, 1980. Mark David Chapman left his room at the Sheraton Hotel, bringing with him a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, which he had signed in the name of Holden Caulfield.
On December 8, 1980, Mark David Chapman was a very confused person. He was literally living inside of a paperback novel, J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. He was vacillating between suicide, between catching the first taxi home back to Hawaii, between killing, as you said, an icon.
He would later state, that morning of the 8th, I just knew. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that was going to be the day that I was going to meet and kill him.
I was standing there with a gun in my pocket.
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Sorry?
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Tried not to, praying not to, but knowing down deep it was probably going to come to that.
Did you know it would be that night? Did you know you would see him again?
Yes, I knew that morning, oddly, when I left the hotel, I had some type of premonition that this was the last time I was going to leave my hotel room. I hadn't seen him up to that point. That's what makes it interesting. I wasn't even sure he was in the building. And then I left the hotel room, bought a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, signed it to Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield, and wrote underneath that, "This is my statement," underlining the word "this," the emphasis on the word "this." I had planned not to say anything after the shooting. Walked briskly up Central Park West to 72nd Street and began milling around there with the fans that were there, Jude and Jerry, and later a photographer that came there.
For the majority of the day, he hung around the entrance to Lennon's Dakota apartment, talking to fans and his doorman. In the morning, he was momentarily distracted and actually missed seeing Lennon step out of a taxi and entering his home. A little while after, his housekeeper returned from a walk with John's 5-year-old son, Sean. Chapman reached out to shake the boy's hand, quoting Lennon's song by calling him a beautiful boy. It was 5 p.m. when Lennon and his wife Yoko left the apartment for a recording session at the record plant. They walked towards the limousine, and Chapman, without saying a single word, held out a copy of his album Double Fantasy, and Lennon autographed it, which was quickly photographed by Paul Goresh, becoming one of the most famous pictures taken shortly before a tragedy.
I have regrets. I'm sorry for what I did. I realize now that I really ended a man's life. Then he was an album cover to me. He didn't exist even when I met him earlier that day when he signed the album for me, which he did very graciously. And he was not a phony, by the way. He was very patient, and he was very cordial, and he asked me if there was anything else. So if that didn't register, and I had also met his son that day, if that didn't register that he was a human being, then I wasn't perceiving him as such. I just saw him as a two-dimensional celebrity with no real feelings.
I bought Double Fantasy.
You bought this album that was very popular at that time.
Yes, it was. Paul kind of pushed me forward. He said, there he is, there he is. So I went up to him and I stuck out my album, and somehow I found the words, and I said, John, would you sign my album?
Where did he sign?
Right on Yoko's neck.
What did you write?
He wrote John Lennon, 1980. And this is the toughest part to deal with, but he was very cordial to me. He wasn't phony. And he even asked me if I wanted anything else. So I always thought there was a premonition there or something that was odd. But when he did sign it, it was a magical kind of a thing. I mean, here's John Lennon in the flesh, and he's signing my album. You know, there was always a struggle there. There wasn't just a murderer standing there, a potential murderer. There was a decent fellow standing there too, who wanted to get the hell back to Hawaii and go back to his wife and say, look what I've got, and just forget about the whole thing.
He came out, I was leaning against the gargoyle-studded railing and was looking down. I was reading The Catcher in the Rye, and I believe he got into a taxi and disappeared. And then later that day, I had gone to lunch with, I believe, Jude. We came back.
With who?
With Jude. She was a fan there that was there at the building. And we struck up a conversation about Hawaii, about John Lennon. She'd been there a number of times. And at one point during the day, she had left, and John came back out. I don't remember him going back in from the taxi, but he was obviously back in the building. He was doing an RKO radio special. And he came out of the building, and the photographer that I mentioned earlier, Paul Gora, she kind of pushed me forward and said, here's your chance. You know, you've been waiting all day. You've come from Hawaii to have him sign your album. Go, go. And I was very nervous. And I was right in front of John Lennon there instantly, and I had a black Bic pen, and I said, John, would you sign my album? And he said, sure. Yoko went and got into the car, and he pushed the button on the pen and started to get it to write. It was a little hard to get to write at first. And then he wrote his name, John Lennon, and then underneath that, 1980. And he looked at me, as I mentioned earlier, he said, is that all? Do you want anything else? And I felt then and now that he knew something subconsciously, that he was looking into the eyes of the person that was going to kill him.
Why do you think that?
Well, his wife was in the car, the door was open, and he's a busy man. He's going to go to a radio or to his record studio, and he's talking to a nobody, just sign an album for a nobody, and he's asking me, is that all I want? I mean, he's giving me the autograph. I don't have a camera on me. What could I give him?
I would admit that is a strange thing to say.
Chapman later admitted that he attempted to convince Goresh to stay, and also asked another nearby fan, Jude Stein, to go out with him that night, and both turned him down. Mark claimed that if either of them had accepted his offer, he wouldn't have killed John Lennon, but he may have returned the following day.
I stand around like an idiot waiting for him to come back.
And what time did he come back?
He came back about 10 to 11 at night.
Had you eaten dinner?
No, I had not.
Fear you might have missed him?
Probably.
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Yes. Well, the photographer left. In all fairness, I have to say I tried to get him to stay.
Because?
There were those that felt that I wanted him to shoot pictures of the shooting, which is not true.
Why then did you want him to stay?
I wanted him to stay because I wanted out of there. There was a great part of me that didn't want to be there. I asked Jude, the fan, before she left for a date that night. She said no. If she'd have said yes, I would have been on the date with her.
But you might have killed him the next day.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
I would have probably come back.
Around 10:50 p.m, John and Yoko returned home in their limo, with the latter getting out first. She walked past Chapman and headed towards the archway entrance of the building, before Lennon followed, walking past Chapman. Mark then fired 5 bullets from his .38 special revolver, with 4 of them hitting him in the back and shoulder.
I was sitting at the inside of the arch of the Dakota Building, and it was dark, it was windy. Jose, the doorman, was out along the sidewalk. And here's another odd thing that happened. I was at an angle where I could see Central Park West and 72nd, and I see this limousine pull up. And as you know, there's probably hundreds of limousines that turn up Central Park West in the evening. But I knew that was his. And I said, this is it. And I stood up. The limousine pulled up, the door opened, the rear left door opened, Yoko got out. John was far behind, say 20 feet, when he got out. I nodded to Yoko when she walked by me.
She nodded back?
No, she didn't. And I don't mean to be so clinical about this, but I've told it a number of times, I hope you understand. John came out, and he looked at me, and I think he recognized, here's the fella that I signed the album earlier. And he walked past me. I took 5 steps toward the street, turned, withdrew my Charter Arms .38, and fired 5 shots into his back.
All in his back?
All in his back.
Never saw it coming?
He never saw anything coming, Larry.
I turned to Satan because I knew I wouldn't have the strength to kill a man on my own. So I went through what I thought was an appropriate satanic ritual, and took all my clothes off and chanted and screamed and howled. And
Before the murder?
yes, I asked Satan to give me the power to kill John Lennon. I used my left hand to buttress the gun underneath, and I fired at his back 5 steady shots. And at that point, for me, the movie stopped. I just stood there, just almost in a trance. The doorman, Jose, came over to me, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Do you know what you've done? Do you know what you've done?" And the tears are streaming down his face. And he grabbed my arm, my right arm, and he shook. And this is a brave man who grabs the arm of an armed man who has just shot somebody and shakes it, and the gun fell down and clattered on the concrete, and he kicked it away. And he said, "Get out of here." He says, "Please, please, just leave. Please get out of here." And I looked at him, and I said, "But where would I go?" I turned to my little security blanket, and I pulled out the Catch in the Rye, and I opened it, I guess trying to read, because I was frightened to death. And they came, they arrested me. I put the book on top of my head. When they threw me against the wall of the archway, the book fell down to the concrete as they were leading me away in handcuffs. I noticed the book was gone, and I said, "Officer, my book, my book." Almost my lifeline, and the officer took up the book and put it in a plastic bag, and he put me in the back of the patrol car.
What happened before the shooting, before I pulled the trigger and after, were 2 different scenes in my mind. Before, everything was like dead calm, and I was ready for this to happen. I even heard a voice, my own, inside of me say, do it, do it, do it. You know, here we go. And then afterwards, it was like the film strip broke. I fell in upon myself. I like went into a state of shock. I stood there with the gun hanging limply down on my right side, and Jose the doorman came over, and he's crying, and he's grabbing my arm, and he's shaking my arm, and he shook the gun right out of my hand, which is a very brave thing to do to an armed person. And he kicked the gun across the pavement and had somebody take it away. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I took the Catcher in the Rye out of my pocket. I paced. I tried to read it. I just couldn't wait, Larry, until those police got there. I was just devastated.
I mean, you can imagine the commotion. I mean, it was surreal. 2 officers were holding John Lennon's body. And I remember the look on the officer's face and what he was mouthing, although I couldn't hear him, the one that was holding his head and his shoulders. And he was just violently cursing me. It was a horrible thing to see. And it frightened me to death. Here's this police officer, and he's just mouthing these horrible words at me. And I sat there for maybe another minute or so, and over in the corner of my eye, I see this figure come up to the window. It was Yoko Ono. She'd come over to the window of the patrol car, and she looked in, and I looked at her, and I'm devastated by her look. I mean, she just wanted to know who's this horrible monster that has killed John Lennon, my husband, you know, and I want to see this rat, you know, I want to see this creep. And I'm looking at her, and I just, utterly ashamed, a big coward. I turn away, and I can't even face her. And when these things came out of me, I could feel them. I could feel them when they came out of my mouth. They were different personalities, and there were different sounds and different languages.
While Chapman didn't remember saying anything, one newspaper report claims that he yelled out Mr. Lennon before firing. He then casually pulled out his copy of The Catcher in the Rye and proceeded to calmly read his book, waiting for the police to come and arrest him.
The next evening, I was talking to Peter Asher's wife on the phone, and she was saying, I think it was at the time of the Manson trials or some kind of reiteration of the Manson thing.
Right.
And she said, man, things are wild out here. They're crazy. And I was just sitting by an open window on the 6th floor of this building, and opposite was a sort of ventilation arch that comes through the courtyard of the Dakota and is blocked off to about the 2nd floor from the street level. But then there's this sort of arch that gives communication from the interior court of the Dakota. And I hear, out on the street, I hear 5 shots ring out. And it was just...
right through your window, you hear it.
And I said, I think the cops have just shot someone down on the street. You think it's crazy out there? I said, she said, how do you know it's the cops? I said, well, it was 5 in a row. They emptied the gun, one under the hammer, and then emptied the gun. And I've been told that's how it goes down, and it sounds like a 38 to me. I said, I think they just killed someone down on the street. She said, wow, that's wild. I said, I gotta go. And she rung off, and 20 minutes later, she called me back and said that was John Lennon.
John Lennon.
Yeah.
I heard this voice. Not an audible voice, but an inaudible voice saying over and over, do it, do it, do it, do it. I guess that was me inside.
Officers were aware that the wounds were severe, so they chose to not wait for an ambulance, instead rushing the musician to Roosevelt Hospital in their squad car. But he was sadly pronounced dead not long after.
I believe it was a Monday. I had come home from work. I took the bus because, like I said, we didn't have a car. I came home. I probably heated up some leftovers or something. Sat like I usually do, cross-legged on the sofa, put on the TV, and Little House on the Prairie was on. Mary on the show had just found out that she had become blind. She couldn't see. And then, like ticker tape on the bottom of the screen, it ran on the bottom that John Lennon had been shot in Manhattan, and it was a male Caucasian. And at that point, it was like my life had become dark, just like Mary.
Just like that.
Yes. And I knew it was Mark, even though they didn't have a name at that point, but it just had to be, he was there. And I just got up from the sofa and I just cried out to God. I mean, nowadays, when people say, oh my God, it's like taking God's name in vain, but I was just saying, oh my God, calling out to him for help. And he was there, he helped me.
How old were you when he passed?
17.
Where were you?
I was actually in my bed, which was
in New York.
No. I never lived in New York in that respect.
You with your mother?
Yeah, I was with my mother in North Wales. She was actually with Maureen Starkey, Ringo's ex-wife, in London, who was a dear best friend, and I was actually in North Wales at the time. And literally, I heard a noise, and it was the chimney fell in. And when you just have that gut feeling that something's wrong, something's really wrong.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs, and all the curtains were closed, and I thought, this is just too bizarre. But who knew what it was at the time? And then opened the curtain, press outside everywhere, and my stepfather had been told not to tell me until Mum, arrived. But I just said, what's going on? You got to tell me. And my first concern at that point was to make sure that Mum was okay, more than anything.
Really? Yeah.
Absolutely, because
she still cared for him.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the first love of her life. So, she'd known him much longer than I'd ever known him, and was much more closer than I had ever been. So it was all about looking after her, and it has been ever since.
Just turned inside out and upside down all at once, because now I was the wife of a murderer, and not just any murder, but the one who killed John Lennon, who is loved by millions around the world, even to this day.
Brilliant man, brilliant musician.
And young people, they know the Beatles, right? So at first it was hard. I would go out and wasn't sure if I was safe. I did, maybe about 2 days after the shooting, I did an interview. My lawyer, I had to get a lawyer, and he said, people are calling, you should just do one interview, get their questions answered, and then hopefully they'll stop bugging you and bugging me. So I said, okay. So I did an interview, and one reporter asked me, Gloria, do you forgive Mark? And I said, yes, I'm a Christian and forgiveness is very important. So yes, I forgive Mark. But you know what, Pastor Stan, even though I said those words for many years, there was something inside of me that spoke later that I found out I really did not truly forgive him. It took a process, it took a work of the Holy Spirit to take away any resentment. Mark had ruined our marriage, like you said earlier, and we didn't have children. I was alone. I was basically like I was a widow. I'm not saying anything like woe is me or anything, but my life was totally different.
Upon capture, Chapman stated, I'm sure the big part of me is Holden Caulfield, who is the main person in the book. The small part of me must be the devil. Due to his obsession with The Catcher in the Rye, it was initially believed that he only killed Lennon as a way to promote the book, but his motive has constantly changed over the years, initially denying that he committed murder for notoriety and originally denying that it was religiously motivated.
I'm not blaming a book. I blame myself for crawling inside of the book, and I certainly want to say that J.D. Salinger and The Catcher in the Rye didn't cause me to kill John Lennon. In fact, I wrote to J.D. Salinger. I got his box number from someone, and I apologize to him for this. I feel badly about that. It's my fault. I crawled in, found my pseudo-self within these pages.
In Holden.
And played out the whole thing.
But Holden wasn't violent.
Holden wasn't violent, but he had a violent thought of shooting someone of emptying a revolver into this fellow's stomach, someone that had done him wrong. But you're right, he was a basically very sensitive person, and he probably would not have killed anybody as I did, but that's fiction, and reality was standing in front of the Dakota.
Former bandmate Paul McCartney also faced criticism, as when he was informed that Lennon was dead, his response was, "It's a drag." But he later defended himself, admitting that he was in complete shock.
I was at home and I got a phone call. It was early in the morning, I was in the country, and I just got a phone call. And it was like, I think it was like that for everyone. It was just so horrific. You couldn't take it in, and I couldn't take it in. And I just know, just for days, you just couldn't think that he was gone, you know. So yeah, it was just a huge shock, and then I had to tell Linda and the kids, and yeah, it was very difficult. Yeah. I mean, it was very difficult for everyone. That was like a really big shock, I think, in most people's lives. It's a bit like Kennedy. Yeah. There were certain moments like that.
Lennon's widow Yoko Ono went on to release a statement. John loved and prayed for the human race. Please do the same for him. President Jimmy Carter spoke out. John Lennon helped create the mood and the music of the time. His music and his message were of peace and love. The world is shocked and saddened by the loss of a great man. On December the 9th, the following day, Mark David Chapman was due to attend a David Bowie performance on Broadway in The Elephant Man. According to Bowie, I was second on his list. Chapman had a front row ticket to The Elephant Man the next night. John and Yoko were supposed to sit front row for that show too. So the night after John was killed, there were 3 empty seats in the front row. I can't tell you how difficult that was to go on. I almost didn't make it through the performance. Mark David Chapman was charged with second-degree murder, admitting to using hollow-pointed bullets just to ensure that he would die.
I didn't even know if the bullets were going to work. And when they worked, I remember thinking, they're working. I was worried that the plane in the baggage compartment, the humidity had ruined them. And I remember thinking, they're working.
What did Yoko do?
She naturally, and I can't blame her, she dashed around the stair area. I don't know if it's still there at the Dakota today, but she just, ran for cover, which is what anyone would do. Mm-hmm. John, according to what I've been told, stumbled up the stairs, and then I saw her come back around and then go up to the stairs, and then she cradled his body.
Did she scream?
I don't think she screamed, but a few minutes after that, there was just a blood-curdling scream from someone, and it put the hair on the back of my neck straight up.
I can face it now. I can look at what I did from a rational perspective, from even another perspective of, kind of placing myself back at that time and trying to analyze what I did, which I'm still undergoing,
Despite his wife Gloria being aware of his plans and doing nothing to stop him, she wasn't charged. Though Chapman claimed that he held a deep-heated resentment towards her for not stopping him.
I just want to say that I'm just still, again, very concerned about Mark, and I'm just very, very sorry that this had to happen to Yoko Ono and her family, and that her husband had to die. I don't feel bitter. I don't think that's the right word. I'm not bitter about it. I think that maybe just somehow some good is going to come out of this all. I don't know what, but I'm just hoping and praying that some good will come out of it. Just a very optimistic type person.
For 6 months he was interviewed by several psychiatrists and psychologists who concluded that he was psychotic with paranoid schizophrenia and manic depression, as well as various different personality disorders. While he was considered delusional, they did believe that he was competent enough to stand trial. Chapman didn't want to be looked at as crazy, but his defense did convince him to be declared insane, as it was the only thing he could really do in this situation. Chapman's lawyer was Herbert Adlerberg, but he faced several threats of being lynched, so he had to withdraw from the case. In fact, authorities were concerned that Beatles fans would swarm the hospital that Chapman was staying in, so he had to be transferred for his own safety. In January, his new lawyer, Jonathan Marks, instructed the man to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, and by February the following month, Chapman wrote a statement simply urging everyone to read The Catcher in the Rye, calling it an extraordinary book that holds many answers. However, he didn't keep the insanity plea for very long and changed it to guilty, claiming that God told him to do so regardless of his sentence. The judge concluded that he changed his plea on his own free will and that he was in fact competent enough to stand trial.
I accept full responsibility for what I did. I've seen places where I'm blaming the devil, and I hope that isn't kept going after this interview. I'm not blaming the devil, I'm blaming myself, but in the major sense, it wasn't me, because I'm better now. I'm normal, I'm functioning, I have a lovely wife, and we have a great marriage, as much as, you know, can be had from here, from Attica. But I'm not the same person in the major sense, because back then I was lost, and I didn't know who I was, but now I do.
Mark David Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life in the Attica Correctional Facility, just outside Buffalo, New York. But it was anything but an easy time there. In February 1982, he began to starve himself until the New York State Supreme Court had to force feed him. He eventually agreed to only eat liquid nutrients, but so long as he didn't do so with the other inmates.
It's a maximum security prison. It's not the same prison as it was those years ago. I'm treated humanely. I'm eating well, as you can see. I am treated, once the officers get to know me, they see I'm just like everybody else, if that can be imagined, and I'm treated decently. I don't have any problem here in that area. I'm not beaten or tortured.
Are you in a cell alone?
Every prisoner in Attica has his own cell. That's one of the good things about Attica.
At first, Chapman was held in solitary confinement for violent and at-risk prisoners, convinced that he'd be attacked by Lennon or Beatles fans. He did have his own cell, but ended up spending the majority of his day outside or in the library. It was reported that he had denied all offers for interviews for 6 years, as he didn't want to give off the impression that he killed Lennon for fame and notoriety. But this isn't actually true. The same year he was convicted, he took part in an interview with James R. Gaines for People magazine, though he later admitted that he regretted doing so.
I wanted somebody to talk to. I was going through a number of years there of basic isolation, no visits, except for my wife, Gloria. And I asked to see somebody. He brought Jack Jones in. I didn't know he was a reporter for the local paper. I kind of freaked out. And after we got to talking, he promised me that everything we talked about would be off the record, and he kept that promise for a number of years. About 2 years ago, on the 10th anniversary of John Lennon's death, I contacted him formally and said, I've got to say something. I've got to come out with something.
Towards the end of the 80s and the early 90s, Chapman was involved in some minor incidents where he would refuse to follow orders, but he did work as a legal clerk and a kitchen helper, though he was banned from participating in workshops and attending violence and anger management classes, fearing for his own safety.
I'm eligible for parole in 8 years.
Okay. Do you have expectations about that? You're how old now?
37.
Okay, how do you deal with 20 years to life? So you know you're going to be there till you're 45.
Right.
All right. How do you deal with that period of time? You know definitely you're going to be there another 8 years. In time frame, how do you deal with that?
As a lifer, which is what we call ourselves across the country, people who are in prison for murder or worse, and who are doing life will try to take it a day at a time, and that's what I do. I've learned to do that. You naturally learn to do that through the years. If you don't, a day at a time. You're in trouble.
All right.
You have to do it a day at a time.
You don't set a goal. You don't say, boy, 8 years from tomorrow, I'm going to walk out of here and do this.
No. I don't think about the board. I don't think about 8 years from now. That's not any prerogative right now.
Well, when you live daily, then, do you set daily goals? Do you say, like, today I am going to finish this book, write this thing?
Yes, I write now. I write Christian short stories. One of them is in the back of Jack's book. It's called The Prisoner's Letter. That took me 3 years. I've just started a new one. I don't know when that's going to be through, but that's a goal right now, is finish this next story. That's a...
It was in the year 2000 when he was asked what he would do if he was released, and he replied, "I would immediately try to find a job, and I really want to go from place to place, at least in the state, church to church, and tell people what happened to me and point them the way to Christ."
I've walked in the power of the Lord now for a number of years.
How'd that happen?
Well, I became a Christian when I was 16, Larry, and that lasted about a year of genuine walking with Him. Through my life, off and on, I have struggled with different things, as we all do, and at those times I would turn to the Lord. The night of the death of John Lennon, I was far from Him. I wasn't listening to Him. I wasn't reading the Bible anymore. Today, I'm different. I read the Bible, I pray, and I walk with Him. He forgives me. He doesn't condone what I did, and that's a very important thing. He didn't like what I did 12 years ago. He didn't like all the pain I caused everybody, and especially John's widow. But He forgives me, and He hears me, and He listens to me, and He is the one, all these years, that has brought me out of the abyss, not medications or counseling. I've basically had to counsel myself.
He claimed that he would either return to his work as a printer or find work on a farm, but this was the first year he was eligible for parole, and he would then be considered every 2 years afterwards. Before the parole hearing, Lennon's widow Yoko sent a letter urging him to remain in prison for the rest of his sentence. New York State Senator Michael Nozzolio, who was also the chairman of the Senate Crime Victims Crime and Correction Committee, wrote to the parole board, "It is the responsibility of the New York State Parole Board to ensure the public safety is protected from the release of dangerous criminals like Mark David Chapman." During the hearing, David actually claimed that he wasn't a threat to society, and that John Lennon would have approved of his release. However, the parole declined and said that releasing him would deprecate the seriousness of the crime and serve to undermine respect for the law.
I'm well now. I've had a number of years of wellness. I feel good. There's always been things inside of me that I wanted to get out, to tell people why I did what I did.
Chapman did actually have a good record in prison, though he did remain in solitary confinement for most of it, but it was doubted that he would ever be released due to the political backlash that would come from it. Yoko admitted that if he was ever let out, her and her sons would never feel safe again. "I am afraid it will bring back the nightmares, the chaos and confusion once again."
Should Mark David Chapman be forgiven?
I know that the Pope went to the jail and visited the jail and forgave this person who was trying to assassinate him, something like that. But I'm not a Pope, and it's very difficult for me to forgive what happened. But I don't even want to think about the person that you mentioned now, and I usually don't, because it's so irrelevant who pulled the trigger.
Well, he loves everybody. He realized a few years ago that God is love, and no matter what he's done, or has done even the day before, God loves him, and because of that, God wants him to love others. So he's learning to look at others and seeing them through God's eyes and asking them, "What do you need? How can I pray for you?" And he is a prayer warrior. If you ask him to pray for something, he's going to pray for that thing right then and also later, and he'll follow it up. He loves to pray.
Please understand, Yoko, I wasn't killing a real person. I killed an image. I killed an album cover. There's enough pain in the world, and I caused it the Titanic's worth overnight. There's some stupid thing. Took away a genius. Took away somebody's husband, somebody's father. I met his son that day. And I knew how far gone I was after I met his son, if I could still do something like that. I mean, he was 5 years old. I don't expect him to forgive me. I'm not asking that. I wouldn't even dare to ask that. But I am sorry. And I mean that. I am sorry.
His parole was denied both in 2002 and 2004, with the court concluding his actions had subjected Yoko to monumental suffering by her witnessing the crime. Furthermore, Lennon fans had threatened to murder him if he was let out, and an online petition received 6,000 signatures to keep him locked up.
I liked John Lennon at one point myself. Before this thought of murder came inside myself, I would be very angry at anybody who did anything to him, so I can understand their anger. It's very difficult being who I am. I have to face what I've done every day. That's not easy. And I imagine this will go on until I die.
I don't call them fans, but there are people that write to me. I got a letter yesterday. I guess you wouldn't call this fellow a fan, but he said, I hereby declare on this date that you will not die a natural death. And then another fellow sent me a package, a book, a Christian book, written by Dr. Henry Cloud. And it's a book on healing. It's a book on looking into your past. And I think I'll read it. So I'm getting both. I'm getting both ends of the spectrum, the extreme hate, which I understand, and the compassion, the understanding. People that have read the book have seen, hey, you know, this was a monstrous act, but perhaps not done by a typical monster.
In 2006, his parole was denied once again, believing that it wouldn't be the best interest of the community or his own safety. Yoko claimed that December the 8th should be a day of forgiveness, but after 26 years, she still wasn't ready to forgive him for taking her husband away.
You expect to stay there for life?
I don't know about that. That's up to this parole division here in the state of New York. I certainly don't think they're going to let me out on the parole day. They because of the nature of the crime, because of a man has died, they generally don't let you go right away.
But it was second-degree murder you pled to, right?
Yes, it was. I pled guilty.
So there was, now they determined not premeditated.
Well, it was definitely premeditated.
And why second degree?
I think that is within the second degree. I think this state doesn't have a first-degree murder except on the books in the case of the killing of a police officer.
Yeah.
Great remorse. He probably, if he were to meet Yoko Ono, he would probably just cry. I don't know if he would be able to talk much. He's a very sensitive man, and he would, of course, apologize. But you know, those are just words, but he'd be sobbing. And for me, I just cannot imagine what it was like for her then and now to lose your beloved. I know they were deeply in love with one another, and I just pray that she can find the hope in Christ that I have, and that it will help her just to go on and to have strength to go on and not to be so fearful.
The parole was denied again all the way until 2012, with the board stating, despite your positive efforts while incarcerated, your release at this time would greatly undermine respect for the law and tend to trivialize the tragic loss of life which you caused as a result of this heinous, unprovoked, violent, cold and calculated crime. On May the 15th that year, Chapman was transferred to the Wendy Correctional Facility in Olden, New York. By 2014, he was granted conjugal visits by his wife, who still stood by him. He stayed in a specially built prison home, a trailer that had been built and equipped with a fully operational kitchen, bathroom and bedroom, being able to spend 44 hours alone with Gloria.
As his wife, of course, I'm there to support him emotionally. He calls me several times a week. I cannot call him, but he calls me, and we talk, sometimes up to an hour, half an hour, up to an hour. And I just share my life and listen to him, and we pray together. We have been for years trying to be together in our thoughts at a certain time every day for 3 minutes. Originally it was 5 minutes, now it's 3 minutes every day, no matter where I am. When my alarm goes off, his is going off too, or at least he looks at his watch, and we just are thinking of each other. And that has kept us close in thought all these years.
I feel I've always been a forgiving person, and that I cannot recall that I've not forgiven Mark for any any wrong thing that he has done. I love him very much, and I'm just very sorry that all this had to happen, that John Lennon had to die, and that his wife and son are going through what they're going through.
Despite his parole once again being denied, he started to supposedly show remorse, stating, "I am sorry for being such an idiot and choosing the wrong way for glory. I found my peace in Jesus. I know him. He loves me. He has forgiven me. He has helped in my life like you wouldn't believe." By 2016, he finally began to admit that the murder was premeditated and started to confess the true nature. "I knew what I was doing and I knew it was evil. I knew it was wrong, but I wanted fame so much that I was willing to give everything and take a human life. This was for me and me alone, unfortunately, and it had everything to do with his popularity. My crime was completely selfish." When asked specifically why he wanted to kill Lennon, he replied, "To be famous, to be something I wasn't. And then I just realised, hey, there is a goal here. I don't have to die and I can be a somebody. I had sunk that low." He admitted to seeking fame and having evil in his heart. This was a human being. "Here I am living so much longer, and not just family, but his friends and the fans. I apologise for the devastation that I caused you. The agony that they must have gone through. I had no thought about that at all at the time of the crime. I didn't care. I don't have any interest at all in being famous. Put me under the rug somewhere. I don't want to be famous anymore, period." Though many have doubted the sincerity in his remorse, believing that it was nothing more than an act to try to get sympathy and an early release. By 2018, while the parole board admitted the risk of him reoffending was low, Chapman admittedly carefully planned and executed the murder of a world-famous person for no reason other than to gain notoriety.
And for me, the biggest thing was that the guy who took his life, the phrase kept coming in my head, jerk of all jerks. It was just like, this is just a jerk. This is not even a guy politically motivated. It's just some total random thing. I go, hey, pop.
Just to damage the broken person.
Yeah.
You benefited from the name, hindered by the name, or it's a wash?
Wow. I wouldn't say I benefited it in the public sense, but I would say it's probably made me the man I am today. Along with the fact that I want to make my mother proud more than anything else. That is number one.
There was news that Mark David Chapman was denied parole. Do either of you have any reaction to that?
Well, it's a very delicate and sensitive and difficult question to answer, and I just don't think I'd like to answer it now. I'm sorry.
Sure, it's not the kind of thing you can really answer simply. I mean, it's complicated, but let's just say that our lives were changed forever by that. So it's a sensitive sort of thing.
Well, especially for Sean, because Sean was so close to John, and suddenly John was gone. It was just a very trying situation.
Yeah, but I mean, it's too complicated to really make a simple statement about.
On March the 30th, 2022, Chapman was transferred again to the Greenhaven Correctional Facility in Beekman, New York, where he remains today. He has still continuously been denied parole, with his next hearing taking place in February of 2027. Whether his remorse is genuine and whether he deserves another chance at redemption is up to you, but together we can all only look at this case and simply continue seeking answers.